Why should you listen to this podcast in particular? I've talked about financial management, about mindset, all of that to help you understand a wealthy life. I've done all of these recordings out in South Africa in order to recenter myself and draw myself back to, again, what it means to have a wealthy life. Yes, I throw in smatterings of property because that is what I do as well, and people are interested in that. But why listen to this podcast, which is about a pediatric palliative care charity in South Africa? Well, Julia, who you're going to listen to, Dr. Julia Ambler, has been a friend for maybe 30 years when she first came traveling, as South Africans often do. We've stayed friends, dear, dear friends ever since, visited one another a lot. And in her line of work, she trained to be a doctor, and then she specialized in palliative care. And palliative care is a relatively new concept, which is taking care of someone when you know that their prognosis is terminal. And Julia does that, but with children. So not just helping older people or injured people come to terms, but actually to work with children who we all know shouldn't be dying before their time. And she does it with such grace and lightness and blessing and a sense of it's a gift to her to be in this position that you can't help but be inspired. And I wanted to just share a couple of the podcast this week and next week about the work that Julia does, basically in a blatant plea to you first to donate to that charity. I will put the links in the show notes. But secondly, in a more punchy, bossy way, if you like, by sharing her story, to say to you, to achieve a truly wealthy life, you have to think beyond yourself. You have to get away from the ego. And I think that's, for me, what I have thought on, reflected on after doing these recordings. That the work that Julia does is not about her ego. I am a god, I can save people, or I can ease their pain as a doctor. It's not that. It's very much about her patients. It's about looking outside of herself, and having spent a lot of time with her, everything that she does is to enable others. And one of the things that she spoke about is seeing a person as a whole human being as a doctor. And that's a thing that she really hangs on to, but also to understand that helping others is not a burden, that it is a privilege to be able to help somebody else in whatever it is, whether it's helping somebody else who is struggling financially, which is something that I find a great privilege, that I can speak to people who really don't understand about money, turn around their mindset and get them to a place where they feel back in control, financially in control, because that removes the stress. I'm not saving someone's life or easing someone's physical pain in the same way that Julia does, but certainly easing someone's stresses to a degree, easing pain. How are you easing the pain of others? How are you helping others to be the best that they can be? Not in a pushy way, because I can certainly relate as a parent, that idea of pushing your child to academic excellence might feel like you're supporting someone to be more than they can be. I don't mean that sort of helping someone to be more than they can be, but if you could remove some burden that someone is carrying without the need to feel to take it on yourself, but remove that burden from somebody else and allow them to just naturally float up into a place where they're more comfortable, where they are more happy, where they are more settled, where they are less stressed. If you could do that, wouldn't that be the best gift that you could ever give someone? We need never give one another physical presence again. We could just help one another by moving one another's burdens. And that would be the best gift you could ever give anybody, wouldn't it? So please listen to this podcast. I'm not going to be talking about property. We're just going to be hearing Julia's story. And next week as well, where she's going to talk about specifically some of the children that she helps. it's not awful and gory. It is inspiring beyond belief. And I commend you to listen to these two. And of course, if you've enjoyed them, and please follow, please leave comments so that others know that these are such important podcasts to listen to. Thank you very much. And I'll hand over to myself and Julia recording this podcast in Durban.
Hello and welcome. My name is Vicky Wachet, and this is both a podcast as part of A Wealthy Life and on YouTube, but also an opportunity to meet Dr. Julia Ambler, who is one of the two directors and founders of a South African charity called Umduduzi. And Umduduzi is a palliative care charity specifically for children, so pediatric palliative care. So, Julia, welcome.
Thank you, Vicky.
So, Dr. Julia, can you please explain what Umduduzi is and how it came about?
So in 2008, I started working with an organization called the Big Shoes Foundation. And part of what they were doing, quite a small NGO, but based in Johannesburg, and they were starting a Durban branch. And one of the things they wanted to do was to start palliative care services for children, because at that point, there really were none in the whole country for any children. It didn't exist at all. So we started, Tracy Brand, our social worker and director, started the Durban branch of Big Shoes. And unfortunately, a few years later, Big Shoes had to close down, and we were left with having done all this work and no organization to be the umbrella. And so Tracy and I sat down and decided that we would start Umduduzi Hospice Care for Children. And our name, Umduduzi, as a word, is a Sisulu word for the comforter. And how we got it, we were sitting at a coffee shop sort of pondering over what we should do and what we should be called. And I said to the waitress, I'd heard this word before, if I said Umduduzi to you, what does it mean? And she said, well, you know, if you're feeling sick and someone helps to make you feel better. And she did this with her arms, hugging herself. And we thought, both of us got goosebumps, and we thought, well, that's it. That's what our name is going to be. So that's how we got our name, Umduduzi. And what we are is we're a very small team of palliative care specialists. I'm a doctor, Tracy's the social worker, and we've now grown a little bit, and we've got 4 part-time nurses who are all retired nurses, but desperate to not give up work and have found palliative care and really gotten very excited about it. And we work in every state hospital in Durban, which is 10 of them, mainly at the big quaternary hospital where the sickest of the sick children come for their diagnoses and treatment for serious liver diseases, kidney diseases, cancers, neurological problems. And our role there is, although we are an NGO, so we do all our own fundraising to be able to employ these staff, we work within the hospitals with the primary treating teams to provide an extra layer of support. So I don't know if you need me to tell you what palliative care.
Yes, I think it would be useful. Let's not assume that people know what palliative care is.
Yeah, well, certainly in South Africa, most people don't. I got asked the other day if I work with pallets, as in mouth care. Oh. No, I do not. Yes, yes.
I was thinking, yes, pallets.
Palliative. Like the roof of your mouth, yes.
Yes.
No, I do not do that. So what palliative care is all about relieving suffering and promoting good quality of life. So regardless of a child or an adult's prognosis or diagnosis, if they are seriously ill, that comes along with huge emotional suffering, social, economic implications, isolation, fear, anxiety, spiritual pain. God, why me? If that sense of feeling separate from what it is that's most important to them. And then, of course, the physical symptoms. So there may be pain or nausea and vomiting, itchiness, fatigue, all of those things that make life very difficult. So palliative care aims to not look at the disease itself, but to look at the impact of the disease and try and relieve the suffering related to the disease any way we can. So that's what we do. So we get referred a variety of different conditions and children, from neurological problems to, we see a lot of cancers. And our role is to provide that kind of support, to get to know the child, to understand what are the kinds of things the child is particularly concerned with or bothered by, and then also providing care to their parents and their siblings. The sibling is often forgotten in this dynamic. The parents are obsessed with the very ill child, and the poor siblings on the side, trying to make things work, trying not to be jealous of their sick sibling, feeling guilty for feeling jealous. So we do a lot of work with the siblings as well.
They still have their needs. I think just to dig back into, you referred to yourself as an NGO, so you're a charity. So all of the wages of your manager, your part-time nurses, you've got play leaders.
Yes.
Because a lot of the children lose their friends, or they're at hospital and they're just kids and they want to play and have some joy in their lives. Tracy's role, and I think you've also got somebody we were talking about who takes care of the pregnant mothers as well, when they're diagnosed with a baby that's sick but still in the womb. And some of your hours, because you are the only South African pediatric palliative care specialist who is paid for by the government, a massive 10 hours that you get for there. So all the rest of your time is funded again through the charity. So along with, as two directors, and yes, you've got your manager, and I know she's being a massive help to you at the moment, but the two of you, the weight is sitting on your shoulders of caring for all these families and children. You're only two human beings. And if you like, if you divide it very black and white, it's not the way I've seen you two work, but you're on the medical side because you're the doctor. Tracy's coming at it from the social worker side, but after all these years, I've heard her talking about the medical side, and you have already spoken about the importance of not just being the technical doctor. Oh, here, take this drug, cut there. So here, you've still got the social worker side. So you two merge, but there's still only the two of you. There's still only, and I don't think you work 40 hours a week. I think you're probably working 50 or 60 hours a week. I've seen all the phone calls that come around the outside, but there are so many children. I've been to your waiting room and I've seen them queued up, and you've spoken to me about how the mothers travel for, up to 20 hours just to get to the hospital, and queue and sleep overnight on the floor to get to see you and to get to see the other doctors. How, I don't want to be insensitive, but how is this not recognized as more important?
It's really tricky, and I've struggled with that very question myself. I think in a country like South Africa, where we've just got such a backlog of social issues and poverty and unemployment, one of the priorities in healthcare, particularly for children, has been to prevent under 5 mortality or to reduce it. Our under 5 mortality was always very high, so that's the number of children per 1,000 that die under the age of 5. And so the priority has largely been to treat pneumonia, to treat and prevent gastroenteritis, to improve vaccinations, to improve antenatal care. So there's a lot of energy and time and money going into stopping the children that shouldn't be dying from dying. And then the children with chronic illness and more serious illness that may die, they get their medical treatment, but it's sort of almost seen as an add-on and an extra and a nice to have. And I think the more people start to understand about the work we do, they realize it's absolutely essential that these families need much more support. And pain management particularly is one of my big bugbears, because we're not trained very well at medical school to manage pain. And yet one of the most common reasons a patient presents is because they're in pain somewhere, and not being able to manage that pain is very limiting. But again, we're disease focused, and so it's all about cure. It's all about getting to that diagnosis, getting what you need from the patient to establish what it is that you need to do and fix it.
Oh, that's quite interesting. That there's a nuance there that I think I'd heard you say before, but I hadn't really got it. So in the role of a doctor, you're getting the information from the patient in order to ascertain the problem.
Yes.
So tell me. Oh, right, I've worked out what's wrong with you. Now, hang on a minute. I'm going to go and have a little think. Right, I'm going to do this, and this to fix you. But at no point have I said, does it hurt? Where does it hurt?
Not at all. It doesn't even come into, so, and this is one of the things that we see all the time is I'll come into a ward and I'll see a child really struggling to breathe. They're on every antibiotic, they're on oxygen, they're getting nebulized with various solutions. And I look at the chart and there's nothing for pain. And you ask the child, have you got pain? Yes. Where is the pain? In my chest. And no one's thought about that. They're managing the cause of the pain without ever acknowledging that there might be pain as well. So that pain management is one of our biggest stumbling blocks, and I think one of the things that impacts quality of life a lot, and it's not that difficult to manage. Of course, you can't just throw a drug at every pain, because a lot of the pain we work with is deeper than simply physical pain. It might be spiritual pain, it might be emotional pain. And that palliative care seeks to alleviate that as well. And we can't fix all the problems. And I think this is one of the things that doctors get so frightened about. And I speak about doctors because it's my experience. But they get so frightened that of uncovering stuff that they can't fix, that they don't want to know.
So how are you in pain? Yes. Where does it hurt? My heart. What do you mean it hurts your heart? Oh, I'm sad. I can't cut out sadness.
Refer to psychiatry.
Yes.
It's really, I think there's a lot of anxiety about uncovering things that you can't fix, that you can't manage. But what we find in palliative care, that actually patients are more than capable of managing a lot of stuff themselves. They need someone to help them unpack it. They need someone to help them negotiate their way through what it is that's actually going on. And when they have a really good understanding of the illness process, of the likely disease trajectory, where is this going to, what are the decisions I might have to make, there is a huge sense of relief. And very often, Tracy and I comment to each other how we might have sat with a family and told them the most terrible news and delivered this information that their child is really not doing very well. And perhaps we might even need to take them off a ventilator in ICU and allow them to pass away. They'll turn around and thank us. And we're always a bit sort of,
why are you thanking me?
Exactly. Why are you thanking me? And it is because of the time. They now understand. We haven't done anything to change the situation. The situation is what it is. We've just been compassionate and understanding and helped them to get to a point where they feel vaguely confident to contribute to the decision making. And I think that is something that we really try to bring home to the doctors that we teach and work with. But there is huge fear. And of course, everybody says time. There's no time. So one of the things that we try and teach is actually, when you do your job really well, it saves you a lot of time.
Yes. Because if I can be helping you with your emotional and spiritual pain, and I won't say remove it, but certainly lessen it, then your ability to support your child or your child to cope is improved, because we've taken off some of some of the bits around the edge, so that you can just focus on the bits that matter, and the translation role too. So how does a sort of a typical day or a week work for Umduduzi? So you've got the nurses. Are they all based at the one hospital? Or?
No, so we cover the whole of Durban, which is quite a big city, and there are 10 different hospitals, and I will receive most of the phone calls that come through to me. We've got a new referral system. We're going digital now, where it's an app that we're going to be able to receive our referrals through that. We then got 2 nurses that cover the north of the city, 2 nurses that cover the south. So as a referral comes in, I mean, before this year, it was pretty much Tracy and I, but we've managed to expand a little bit. And I will sort of hand out the referral and say, please, will you go and see XY child? This is what the need is. This is why they've been referred. They will make contact with that family and start the process of supporting them, whichever way we need to. And then at Albert Lutuli, I'm there every Monday and Wednesday, because those are my 10 paid for hours. 5 hours and 5 hours, and we have a clinic that we run, a palliative care clinic. So hospitals from around the province can actually refer patients to that clinic for palliative care planning. And so we see about sort of 8 to 10 new patients in a week, which is quite a lot for a small team. And the consultations take time because we do want to get all the nitty-gritty. We want to find out what those issues are. So every day is a little bit different, and everybody's going to different hospitals and picking up patients all over the place. And then, of course, once they go back to where they came from, we need to keep in contact. So whether they go home after discharge or whether they go back after their appointment, we keep in contact, and we do that by WhatsApp. Most of our patients have some kind of smartphone that has the ability to do WhatsApp, which is great.
So is there any point where, say, for example, one of the outlying hospitals lets you know that they've got a child that needs seeing, and you send the nurses, that the nurses can cope on it? Or does it ultimately all fall back onto you and Tracy all the time?
It depends on the kind of issue, but ultimately it does come back, especially as things get more complicated. These nurses that we've got working with us are all recently retired and have just started with us this year. So there's a big learning curve. And they've repeatedly mentioned how different palliative care is to traditional nursing. And they're loving it because it is much more social and emotional and kind of interactive. It's less technical.
Yes.
Although the skills are, quite technical, a lot is around the communication and
it's not, I've got 5 minutes. Could you, in the next 2 minutes, tell me what's wrong with you? So I've got 2 minutes to work it out and 1 minute to tell you. It's not that style of doctoring.
No. And particularly when you're working with children, it takes time for a child to warm up and to feel free to ask the questions they want to ask. And it's one of my favorite things. I get really stressed every time I think a child might talk to me about their very serious illness, because you never know what a child is going to ask you. But it's such a joy when they do feel that they can ask and talk about what really bothers them. And I'm constantly amazed at how aware children are of what's happening to them, much more than we think. We always underestimate children and the insight that they have, and about death, about dying, about what happens after death. They've got these thoughts, and it really is. It's a magical spot to be in, where a child is having an open conversation about those things. And I think that is the privilege of palliative care, is that we do take a bit more time. We are allowed a bit more time in a busy outpatient clinic or a busy GP practice. 10 minutes a patient, it's, you can't really do it. So we are lucky that we create that time and the continuity. We get that as well. So important.
Because you're with them on a journey. But not necessarily the start, because the start may have been undiagnosed months ago, but by the time they get to you, that start of them being with you, you're with them until the end. Whether it's always going to be a good end, at the better end than it would have been, but whether the child lives or whether the child doesn't live, you're with them along that journey. And I've also seen that you're often with the parents post the journey too, because they remember you. And
well, you've developed that relationship with them, and so some parents sort of choose to move on and not look back, and others are very happy to be engaged, and some will even share new material that they've discovered on grief or bereavement, and WhatsApp that me, I've read this great thing and it was really helpful, maybe it'll be helpful for your other parents. So it's a very special relationship and an incredible journey to be on. And I wish we didn't have to do it, but unfortunately children do get sick, and this kind of support is really, I think it's absolutely essential.
What I've heard listening to this is, there are the doctors that, by nature of their job title, they are there to identify, to diagnose, to remove, cure, fix, stitch, and to move on to the next one. But with that is time pressure, and I think the fear of failure we've spoken about. If you are a doctor that treats people with cancer and your cancer patient doesn't live, or mend a bone and then they still have a limp, or go in to fix a heart valve and then they have a heart attack, there's a notion of failure. You've failed to do that. And I think I've mostly heard it on TV programs about doctors' mortality rates or doctors' success rates or this sort of thing, or I've done 1,000 operations and I've never lost a patient, and all of that pressure. Listening to you talk about this is a sense of, bizarrely, joy or happiness in what you're doing, even though what you're doing is something any normal person would go, oh my goodness, I just don't think I could spend my life helping children who are most of the time, like 99% of the time or 75% of the time, I don't know what your ratios are, but they're going to die. And to cope that, but you seem to get your joy, your strength, your blessing, your inspiration through the thought that you're on a path that's inevitable. And actually, we're all going to die.
Exactly.
We're all going to die. It's just that this small subsection of tiny humans, for whatever reason, are going to die sooner than others. And you can make it less painful for the child, for the family, as you've mentioned, for the siblings. And then at the end, whatever the result, and some survive and some don't survive, you know that space of time they've been with you has been better for the connection that you've made. It's almost as if your job's a gift.
Yeah, I would say that, and I think it is why I'm so passionate about it. And I've always said I feel very blessed to be in a job that I love. From quite a young age, I've worked in palliative care for 20 years now. It's a long time, and I still love it, and I'm not burnt out, and I'm not tired of it. And I often feel that doctors who see themselves as sort of more technicians miss out of it. Managing blood pressures is not as exciting as managing the person who has the blood pressure.
Yes.
And the same with the surgeons. And I do think, and over the years, I've met many doctors who do get the joy, and they look for the joy in their patients because they stop the dehumanizing. And I think a lot of our system pressures and time, all of that, do contribute to the dehumanizing and the disease focus. But at the same time, that's a choice that you make. You can either choose to see the people that you're working with, or just see them as bits of furniture that you can move around. And I know which I prefer.
Yeah, I think I've known you for over 30 years, since before you started your medical training. I've known what you do. I was there and know about Big Shoes and the start of Umduduzi. And then to get to the point where we've had these conversations, I think for the first time in my life, I'd always thought, how can you do this? How do you cope? And I think I've finally understood. It's taken a lot of conversations. We've had a lot of conversations, but I think I finally got it. It's not going to take anything away. I still think you're amazing. I think the work that you do is amazing. You're an inspiration, and I've seen the way that people react to you and to what you have done for them. So it's not ego you, but it is you, because you were there you or Tracy or both of you were there at this awful time, but you have taken some burden, some weight from them. And I couldn't understand how, if I took some weight from someone, how that weight didn't land on me. That's what I think I've just understood, that in taking the weight from them, it doesn't land on you as a weight.
It doesn't have to.
No.
And I think a lot of doctors are scared that it will. And perhaps there are those personalities that just couldn't be in this work. But at the same time, whichever specialty you're in, because human life is finite, you're going to deal with desperate times where people are very ill and not going to recover and suffer a lot on the way. And I would just rather know that, whatever else I'm trying to achieve, that I'm easing that suffering at the same time. And it just comes back to seeing a person as a whole human being. And I hope I never lose that.
No, I hope you never lose that too. And I don't think you ever will lose that. Julia, I want to thank you so much for your time. I've been speaking with Dr. Julia Ambler, co-founder of the Umduduzi hospice care charity here in Durban, South Africa. And I would commend you to look at the notes pages, to follow the links, to learn more about this charity, but also to think about, does helping somebody else have to be a burden on you? Is there a way that you could help others that actually lights you up? Because I think if you're watching this on YouTube, I can see the expression in Julia's face when she speaks. This is not a burden to her. This is almost a joy, which sounds a strange thing to use as a word, but I can't articulate it anyway, but a blessing. It is a privilege for you to be in this role. And I think that it gives you pleasure, not gives you pleasure because your children are dying, but gives you pleasure that you can ease their pain. And maybe even a comfort to you to know that you can do that. And that is just so inspiring. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that I have been able to give you a little bit more whoosh in your life, that maybe you can look for your blessings and look at how in helping others, you may get some joy and some comfort in your own life, so that it's not just about you, it's about how we can help others. Thank you again, Julia.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you. Very best wishes to you all. Please make sure that you like, follow, subscribe. Make sure that you check out all the videos in this series, because I think if you listen to all of the recordings that I've made with Julia, you won't come away uninspired. Thank you.
I am Dr. Julia Ambler, co-founder of Umduduzi Hospice Care for Children. And I'm here today to ask you for help. Our job is incredibly important. We have a very small team of dedicated professionals providing another layer of support to children that have got serious illness and to their families and siblings. Palliative care for children is a very poorly understood field. A lot of people think it's only about death and dying. They don't realize how stressful an illness is for a family and a child that are experiencing it. So at Umduduzi, we receive referrals from the whole province of KZN. We see children from 0 to 18 with conditions such as cancer, liver problems, kidney failure, heart problems. These families are diagnosed, are given very serious diagnosis. They've got to cope with that emotionally. They've got to process it. They've got to understand the treatments, the implications of those treatments, the prognosis. There's also much time that a child spends away from school, spends away from home, being admitted into a strange and unfamiliar place. And then, of course, there's the spiritual side of illness. Very few of us can separate our mind, body, and spirit when it comes to something as serious as sickness, such as cancer. So our role at Umduduzi is to really focus on that, find out what are the issues that this particular family and child are facing over and above the simple diagnosis that they have received. How do we provide that extra support that they need? It may be as simple as providing them a pram, an umbrella stroller. Perhaps the child has got a neurological disability and transporting the child is so very, very difficult. That pram costs 1,000 Rand and is completely out of reach for them. But maybe we can relieve some of their suffering by providing them with this mode of transport that can easily be put into the taxi as they make their way to hospital for their numerous appointments. That help that we might give might be more about pain management. Very few doctors focus on what a child is experiencing. They manage the disease, they treat the pneumonia, they treat the cancer, but have they asked about what the pain is, where is the pain, and how can we alleviate that pain physically, emotionally, and spiritually? So palliative care is really essential in any kind of healthcare setting. Unfortunately, in South Africa, it is purely in the NGO sector. There are very few people that are paid to do palliative care. And at the moment in South Africa, I am the only doctor receiving any funding from the Department of Health for palliative care. And I receive 10 hours a week to provide these services to the children of KZN. So we're in a difficult situation. We've got 4 part-time nurses, a social worker, another very, very part-time doctor, a translator, and now recently we've employed a manager to help us with some of the fundraising because it is just such an arduous task. So despite being a small team, all of these people are professional and need to be paid. And the families that we support really do need that extra layer of support that we are offering. So I'm asking you today, It doesn't matter how little or how much, if you've got something to be able to give, whether it is in the form of a donation, such as a pram, or giving of your hard-earned money to pay for an hour of a nurse's time, we need you. And we really would be very grateful if you would consider following us on our social media pages, joining up to, we've got 100 Club, where you, if everyone just gave 100 Rand a month, we would be able to cover all our costs quite simply. So please think about supporting us as we support the children with serious illness based in KZN.